In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 133 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is resilience. Our quote of the day comes to us from Mary Holloway. Resilience is knowing that you are the only one that has the power and responsibility to pick yourself up. Today's episode is sponsored by the good people over at West Fair Communications, who publish the Westchester County Business Journal and the Fairfield County Business Journal. These newspapers do a wonderful job in covering all aspects of the business world within two of the most influential markets in the New York metropolitan area. You can also take advantage of their daily news feeds, which keep track on the companies and thought leaders in these important regions. For more information, take a look at www.westfaironline.com. Trust me, once you start reading, you won't quit. It is a complete honor and privilege to bring you today's episode. Our guest, Mary Shores, has quite a no-quit story of her own, where she encountered multiple challenges throughout her life, but she didn't give up. From moving out at the young age of 16, dealing with a young pregnancy and the death of a child, Mary had many times throughout her life where she easily could have given up. She shares some really interesting perspectives that we can all apply to our lives. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Mary, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thank you, Chris. I am so excited to be here, and it's really nice to meet you.
I appreciate you spending some time with us. So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
I am so excited to bring it right now, right here.
Awesome. So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you had either a no-quit story yourself or perhaps a challenging time that tested you, but you kept on going and didn't give up.
It's so interesting that you asked me that, because recently I was filmed in a documentary that was all about resilience, and I believe it's called the Global Resilient Project. And really my entire life has just been overcoming and thriving through one challenge or another, starting from, I'm one of these people, I was out on my own at 16 years old and really had absolutely no guidance and no resources, still managed to finish high school, but ended up having a child when I was 19 who was born with a severe, profound brain injury, which looks like she was blind, she was deaf, she was unable to suck or swallow, so she had a gastrostomy tube inserted into her stomach. And at 19 years old, I had no way of processing or understanding what was going on. And this turned out to be a very deep trauma in my life, one that in a lot of ways I'm still healing from. And she lived for a little while before she passed away because her injury was really terminal from the beginning. But she did live through a year and a half. And during that time, I spent a lot of time in children's hospitals. And this is just putting a very young girl in a situation where I'm seeing things that I could never unsee. And it was just a really traumatic time watching her suffer, watching the other children suffer. We're talking, cancer victims, burn victims, their families, people in tragic car accidents. And I somehow got through that time and started my first business when I was 24. And I ran that business now for 20 years. But if I'm being really honest, I can tell you that throughout these tragedies, and I ended up having another child with special needs. So my son, who actually just turned 18 very recently, he is on the autism spectrum. And so I've navigated life trying to have this child that there's really no rule book for raising him, because his operating system is very different. And so that's been another thing. But if I had to boil it down to one thing, Chris, it would really be my divorce. My divorce that I went through in 2008 left me so shattered that it was almost like it was accumulation of all the other tragedies that had happened into my life, and that was the one that finally broke me. And so for a 2-year period, I literally did not think I was going to make it. I felt like I was going to die. I felt like I was going to lose my business. I felt like I was going to just slowly wither away. In fact, I would visualize myself as this sort of bag lady. It was just a really terrible, tragic time in my life.
Well, I did not know all that backstory, and I appreciate you sharing that. And this is something I'm going to share now with our listeners that I've never shared. But I had a younger sister who lived for less than a year, and she passed away when I was in middle school. So I can't say that I know exactly what you're going through, because it wasn't a child of mine, but it was obviously my sister. And I think you've definitely been dealt your fair share of things, and I'm sorry for your daughter's passing, and congratulations on your son. You now have an 18-year-old. I'm sure that brings a gazillion challenges within itself. But if I could touch on the divorce period you mentioned, is what kept you going during those tough times, as far as was it something that you were reading? Was it people that were in your corner? Was it something? How did you get through those tough times, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about that as well, because all of the signs were around me that I should have failed. I mean, given what I was going through at that time, I was also first receiving the diagnosis of my son. He was in the 3rd grade at the time, because this was 2008, 10 years ago. But I had done enough things right. I think that sometimes we don't necessarily give ourselves credit for all the things that we do right. And there was a couple of things. So a few years earlier, I own a debt collection company. And so right away, I just think I kind of giggle at myself, because here I'm this, personal development expert, communications expert, but I own this debt collection company. And I had owned this company, and my mission really was, and still is to this day, that I want people to feel good about paying a debt, because having a debt is a burden, and it's a psychological burden that gets in between people and living the life of their dreams. And so when I was very young, because remember, I was only 24 when I started this company. And of course, I thought at 24 that I knew everything in life, right? Because we all do at 24. But I really didn't know anything. But I knew that I wanted to take a sales approach. And the sales approach in collections was not working for a couple of reasons. Number one, all of my competition was threatening people and making them pay through extreme anxiety. So the fear won over the happiness, which is what I was trying to do. But number two, it didn't address the shame and unworthiness that was really at the root of debt. Okay, so this is just part of the story, and I'll stop it right there, because that is one of the things that I had done right, is I was establishing a communication strategy that later on, after I dug myself out of the pit of hell that was my divorce, I had this golden gem in my back pocket. The second thing was that from the very beginning, I was a person that always wanted to have structure in my business. I think that one of the biggest mistakes that I see small business owners make is that they fail to document. And I documented everything. I still do to this moment. I like to make this joke that there's a work instruction to create a work instruction. And so everything being so documented, when I fell on my worst times, which by the way was the same time as our economic crisis, I had a couple of things. My brother had come to work with me. He had just finished law school, and he said, "Hey, I want to come, work at the family business." And I said yes. And so my brother was sort of this force in my life that is somebody I really trusted, because I knew he had my best interest at heart. And I felt secure with him being there. Another thing is that I went to my staff and I said, "Look, I'm going to fall apart. I'm your leader. You guys just need you to do that." And I also made them a commitment that no matter what, because at this time, all the other companies there were hiring freezes, people were laying people off, or people were taking as much as like 20, 30% pay cuts in order to keep their jobs. And I said, no one's going to get laid off. We're not going to reduce staff at all. We are going to do what we can to keep this together. And believe me, collection agencies were hit hard, because if people are losing their jobs and people can't pay their expenses to live, they're certainly not paying the debt collector.
No, I could not agree more. And I think as far as a line of list of people who get paid, obviously in the economic crash of 2008 and 2009, if you can't pay a mortgage, you can't pay your electricity bills, debt collections are far below on the list. So I appreciate you sharing that. And again, you went into some personal things. And I think what I love most about this show, and my number one objective with every episode, is to connect somebody with somebody else. So I'm sure, and I hope that many of our listeners are out there not going through identical situations as what you had, but hopefully in some ways going through similar, in the sense of maybe a divorce or perhaps challenging business time. And the objective is to motivate and inspire those people to never give up. So I wanted to ask you, Mary, how do you personally define success?
I feel like my current definition of success, which, by the way, it's been morphing and evolving and changing over the years of my life, but right now I'm really defining it as the impact that I can make in the world, in my life, with my children, with my staff. I'm looking at leadership in a very different way, as being able to look at people and make the connections about what is their hidden superpowers, and helping them bring that into the world. Because I really believe that we're living in a time and a space where it's more important than ever to create companies that are humanitarian plus, meaning that we're looking at ways to make an impact, to always be moving the human race forward. And we've got to stop looking at ways to stall the human race or move it backwards. And recently I've been talking a lot about leadership and competition, because I feel like the old paradigm is more like when I was a kid and I was really good at playing Monopoly. But the thing about Monopoly is the way you win is you have to bankrupt all your friends. And isn't that interesting when you compare that to business and business competition? And I think, what if it doesn't have to be that way? If we can be in an environment where we look at everyone else as collaboration, and we really figure out, how to be connectors more than competition, I think that is my current definition of success.
I love that you said that. What you said in the introduction of that question is it's always changing and morphing, and that's the best part about someone's definition of success. Is when you're 20, it's different when you're 25 or 30 or 40 or 50, and not good, bad, or indifferent. It's just that's what happens in life. So I appreciate you sharing that. I wanted to ask you, if you had to define yourself in one word, what would that word be?
Resilient. Resilient for sure, because it seems like that through every challenge that I go through, it only serves to somehow bring out my courage, bring out my strengths, and through that persistence and resilience, I just somehow come out. I'll say it this way: I look at my heart that's just been shattered into a million pieces. And one time during a therapy session, this person said to me, when you get this all back together, think about if you take a mirror or a piece of glass and it's shattered, but you glue it all back together into like a chandelier. Now it has millions of facets of light that can shine out into the world. And I feel like every time I go through one of these challenges, that's what's happening to me. It's like it's shattering me, but it's putting me back together so that I have like this unstoppable power.
I love that, and I really appreciate you going in a little bit on that, because for me, life is not about the successes. It's easy to be happy when everything's going great, and it's easy to be happy when you have a ton of money and friends and everything's perfect, but it's those challenges and those obstacles along the way that make you better. And I love the way you referenced it as putting back together, and it's almost like every time you get knocked down, you get up stronger, tougher, and having learned something, if not multiple things.
It's so true. And I think that I really love the motivational stuff, and it's really natural for me to inspire people, because I can just do that naturally by sharing my story and helping people see that instead of trying to find your purpose, you're really creating your purpose as your life is going on. And we can do that by developing our skills, our gifts, our talents, and focusing on those things, because in some ways we've been taught to constantly overcome our weaknesses, when I think that we need to be feeding our skills. And so who you become, who you allow these things to shape your character as, when you peel back the layers of all of the cultural expectations and our expectations that we put on ourselves, and you start to peel back the layers of all of that self-judgment, and you really just step into the power of who you actually are, you will go through an incredible transformation. And I'm the first one to say that my journey has not been a graceful one. It's been really uncomfortable at times, but the result of that is the amount of my personal dreams that I've made come true. I just, sometimes it's hard for me to even accept it and realize that, like, wow, it's here. You have this best-selling book with your favorite publisher. You've got a thriving business. You've got an amazing team of people around you. You get to travel. You get to do all of these fun things, and you get to make your impact in the world just like what you wanted.
Speaking of books, I believe something exciting happened last August in 2017. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, that's right. So my book, Conscious Communications, your step-by-step guide to harnessing the power of your words to change your mind, your choices, and your life, was released by Hay House Publishing. And within 2 months, it sold out its first print run, became a #1 bestseller on Amazon in 3 categories, which are self-esteem, happiness, and communications. It was, nothing in life up until that time could prepare me for what that journey has been like. Just having this book, making a difference, getting emails from people all over the world telling me how this book is changing their life.
Wow, that is pretty impressive. I did not know the specifics of a bestseller in 3 different categories. That is remarkable. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
So for any of our listeners that are interested, what's the best way for them to find your book? Is it on Amazon? Do you have it other places as well?
It is on Amazon, Conscious Communications, and of course you can find it anywhere where you buy books, Barnes & Noble. I'm sure there's a link on my website. And we're actually, for your show notes, we're giving all of your listeners the first chapter for free if they want to check it out.
No, it's awesome. I appreciate that. So one of the things we look to do is add value to our listeners. And I was curious if you have a morning or a daily ritual that you swear by.
I do. I'm a big ritual person, so I change them up. And the one that I'm doing currently is, I call it the Daily Desires Diary. And so what I do is every day I say 3 things that I'm grateful for, which I've been having this gratitude practice for a few years now. And it's really strong because I'm all about neuroscience. And so when you take the time to create a daily gratitude practice in your life, what you're doing is you're planting seeds in your subconscious mind that is sort of building that muscle of finding things to be grateful for in your life. And the result of that is you start to notice more opportunities around you all the time. And you're doing things that are creating serotonin and dopamine in the brain, which actually make you feel better. And the second part of this diary is that I take time every day to acknowledge 3 proud moments for the day. So it doesn't have to be huge wins. It can just be a small proud moment. And I state 3 of those. And the final thing is 3 things that I desire. And all 3 of these practices, which I can do this in less than 2 minutes a day, all set up my subconscious mind to find things in life that create that momentum to always be connecting myself to what I want in life. I think we're living in a time that we all accept that infinite possibilities are available to us, but we haven't figured out exactly how to stop creating all the chaos and uncertainty.
I love that you shared that with us, because I think one of the things we talk about almost every single show is rituals, and a common theme over the last 2 months has been the concept of gratitude. And I forget the quote, I'm probably going to butcher it, but something along the lines of, you can't be grateful and upset at the same time.
I love that, because it's 2 different parts of your neural pathways working. And so that totally makes sense to me.
So speaking of quotes, I was curious, do you have a favorite quote yourself?
Yes, so I love to say, everything you do, every word you speak, every action you take, every choice you make in the thinnest sliced moment of life is either creating a deeper connection to what you want or it's driving a disconnection.
Wow, is that one of your quotes or somebody else's?
It is my quote.
That's awesome. Now, this might be a tough question, but if you can remember, what's the best advice you've ever received?
I believe that the best advice that I ever received was from my stepfather, who told me to always hire people that are smarter than myself.
That's great advice, and I think some of our listeners who are entrepreneurs in the business world, it's such great advice. But you can also take it to make it more personal to you as well as with your people that are in your circle. Is you always connect with people that are smarter than you in a certain topic or have an expertise that you don't have, so you can learn from them. So I love that quote, not only from life itself, but business, personal relationships. I think there's so much overlap in so many areas of life.
It's so true. And I was listening to a podcast with a neuroscientist by the name of Moran Cerf, and he was actually explaining that they've measured this scientifically, that whoever you surround yourself in with life, your brain waves actually synchronize. And so those old wives' tales, like, what is it? Birds of a feather flock together. And, those kinds of things turn out to be true, but not necessarily the way that we thought it was. But literally who you surround yourself with, your brains synchronize together and you can become a better person just by surrounding yourself with the people that you admire and that you want to emulate.
That's interesting. And I love how you bring the science behind it, because that's obviously an area of your expertise. And I think people don't realize, and I'm one of them myself, is I always believed in personal development and trying to become a better version of yourself ever since I was in my teenage years, not fully understanding the science behind if and when what you put in front of your mind or what you speak. But it does have a conscious and a subconscious, such a positive outcome. And so I really appreciate you touching on the scientific side. So I wanted to ask you, if you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself one piece of advice, what would you give as far as advice to the 20-year-old Mary?
Wow, well, 20-year-old Mary was really in a tough spot. And so I guess I would tell her that you are more powerful than you can ever understand right now.
That's great advice, and just knowing a little bit about you, I think you are beyond powerful that you did not understand at that point. So I wanted to change lanes for a second here. And if you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
That is such a great question. It sucks to limit it to one person. I'm going to say Tim Ferriss. I just love the way his mind works. There's never been something that he says or does or that I've listened to that I haven't thought, wow, that's just really smart.
That his name has come up probably sixth or seventh most in these shows during that question, and it's based upon what you said, is just the way his mind thinks. And what I love about Tim, having read some of his most recent books, is Tim connects with so many people, and Tim brings guests and people he's interviewed, and he gets their perspective. And I think that's the best characteristic I would love to emulate with Tim, because he doesn't just say, this is what I think, and this is my law, and this is what I think because I think it. He goes deep and he asks specific questions, and he says, what would you do here? What would you do for $100? What's the best $100 purchase? He asks some of those really, I don't want to say basic questions, but they're basic in the sense because it really tells people and you can learn from people. So I think that would be an awesome dinner.
I think so too.
So I want to ask you if there's anything else exciting that you're working on that's coming out soon, or anything that you'd like to tell or share with the listeners.
I've got so many things happening in my life. I mean, I'm always out there talking about the book Conscious Communications. I've got some workshops coming up. I'm looking at perhaps teaching some workshops at some resorts over the summer and into next year. So I'm totally a spa person. This is a perfect fit for me. I just want to go live at the resort, teach some workshops and just hang out and totally decompress for a while. Outside of that, I've got some customer service trainings that I'm working on. I always love talking about customer service and the power of words and how we can through business create deeper connections with our clients and our customers and stop driving away those disconnections. And I'm working on my second book, The Communication Code.
When does that book come out?
Oh, it's not even written yet. I'm literally finishing up the proposal now to send off to the publisher.
Well, please, we'll definitely stay in touch, and I would love to talk about that as well at some other point.
Yeah, I would too. That would be so much fun.
So I have a question for you. If you could magically snap your fingers and fast forward 1 year from today, and you could have accomplished absolutely anything, what would that one thing be?
I would love to have my second book written, but I'm going to go deeper on this question because I love questions like this. I want to have my life structured in a way that I am 100% of the time working on strategy with my business, and things are just flowing in a way that the connections just get made easy and effortlessly. So I think it's less about a thing and it's more about the flow.
No, I definitely agree, and I love how you touched on structure a few times. I think structure for me is a word that you can replace sometimes a discipline, and I think some of the most successful people we've had on our show, they really have some things that they do very specifically, and they're very disciplined in what they do each and every day. So I appreciate you sharing that. Before we let you go, Mary, I wanted to ask if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners.
Yeah, I want the listeners to understand that no matter what your circumstances are in life, whether, a lot of us are in a really great place, but we know that we can do more. We know we can eke out that last bit of energy, that we can create, that we can do all of these powerful things. And a lot of times what keeps us stuck is just not necessarily knowing how or the first steps to take. And so a big thing that I believe in is always just taking one step in a direction. If you want to write that book, go to a writer's workshop. If you want to start a business, make an investment in yourself to learn how to do that. If you want to lose 20 pounds, just, create a plan of doing that. But for me, like the biggest things that have happened in my life have been not because I did something for money, but because I was willing and able to take one step in a new direction that was just getting my toe out of that comfort zone. And, if we think about I'm all about end result thinking and reverse engineering that, but sometimes that can also be overwhelming. So if we just think, what is the first thing that I need to do? And just really fully step into that one step.
That's awesome. What is the first thing you need to do? And I think one of the things we often touch on in different ways with our show is getting out of your comfort zone. And I think what you said was spot on is what take that first step. And I think you mentioned reverse engineering. I'm a big reverse engineer in the sense of if you look at the end result, then you back in saying, okay, what do I need to do today? What do I need to do by tomorrow? So I think that's great advice, and hopefully our listeners will listen and take it in the sense of if there's something that they're looking to do, like you mentioned, losing 20 pounds. Don't look at losing 20 pounds tonight, but look at that first step, that first workout, that first healthy meal. And I think when you break things down into bite-sized pieces, it's so much easier to accomplish those goals and objectives.
It's so true. And in the back of the book, I have something that I call a one-page action plan, because here I've had this business for 20 years and it's really grown and grown, but I've not been somebody who's planned out like a 5-year business plan. I've always just created these one-page action plans for everything. And you do that by starting with the end result, the goal, and then you break it down into the pieces. And I call it one-page action planning, but I have the whole blueprint for it in the last chapter of the book. So I just encourage everyone to check that out if that's something that they want to do, but do it simply. And it's amazing when you have that one page of strategy in front of you, how easy it is just to take that one step at a time.
No, that's great advice, and I definitely would recommend that. So for our listeners that would like to connect or follow you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I would love all the listeners to find me on LinkedIn if they want to. The name is Mary Shores. Of course, I have a website, Mary Shores, SHORES.com. And anyone can join my Facebook group if they like. It's called Fearless Ambition, and we would love to have you be part of the community.
Well, Mary, listen, I really, really appreciate the time you spent with us today. You shared some really interesting things with us, and I definitely would recommend our listeners checking out your book, Conscious Communications, as well as following you and connecting with you on their own as well.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's so great to be here.
Thank you for listening to episode number 133. Mary definitely delivered today. And if there was something that you connected with, we hope that you apply it and take action. When we discussed daily rituals, Mary shared her morning threes, where she writes down 3 things she is grateful for, 3 proud moments, and 3 things that she desires. The best part about her morning ritual is that Mary said the entire process can take her under 2 minutes. She also shared how our challenges make us better. No matter what your circumstances are in life, we can all do more. But what keeps us stuck is not knowing that first step to take. The biggest things in Mary's life have been because she was willing to take the first step in the right direction and getting her toe out of her comfort zone. So my question to you, the listeners, what is that first step you need to take today? If you want to write a book, lose weight, or maybe start a business, why haven't you? What's keeping you from starting or even trying? No matter what it is you want to do, try or attempt, do it. You might fail, you might not hit your target, but you also might exceed your expectations if you try. However, if you don't make an attempt, and if you don't take that first step, no matter what, you won't ever succeed. So my challenge to you is very simple. Get that toe out of your comfort zone and go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.